The question is, do we go by God's way or man's way? It's wonderful to be back here with you again. I know I've had a few weeks off. I apologize for that. But I am Pastor John. I'm here from Livingstone's and Sunland, Tujunga Seventh-day Adventist Churches, and it is time for the call to prayer. Yes, I have been away. I apologize for that. I was planning in Arizona to do a call to prayer, but when I was with my mom and dad and my wife and my son, we were having such a great time. And as I was trying to get things together, it was so hot outside, I wasn't going to do it. I said, never mind, another week off. I apologize for that. But even though I had a week off, it doesn't mean that we don't continue with the Word of God. We are in Acts chapter 22. If you'll remember, we worked together toward understanding that Paul's shrewdness was his way out of many situations, and God can allow us to have shrewdness in our hearts, meaning not to control others, but to do God's work. You know, it takes smart, shrewd people to get the work of God done. It would never have gotten done if we just sat around on our hands and said, will somebody let me reach the people with a message? You know, it's not going to happen like that. Not in this world. Everything in this world and the entire organizational process of all nations is to destroy and push back the Spirit of God. Human systems are not pro-God, but all of nature intends for God to be in charge. But all of us oftentimes make choices. Many times those choices are not pro-God. They're pro-us. They're pro-our system. And this brings us now to this next part. For if you'll remember, he mentioned that he's a Roman citizen. The Romans said, oh, we can't beat this guy. We need to treat him decently with a trial. But then the next step is they found, okay, so the Sanhedrin was the ruling body of Jerusalem, of Israel at the time. And there were two prominent political parties, really four of them, but two of them were the strongest, which is the Pharisees. We always hear about Pharisees and Sadducees. The Sadducees were generally those that were in the temple, those that were in charge of the money systems. The Pharisees were generally those in charge of common business, normal people out there, ones that oftentimes they push the law and people's individual actions as they do for God what they must, and they came up with lots of rules, regulations for the people, and we see that in the Bible. But Sadducees, on the other hand, they were in charge of the temple, in charge of the money systems. They liked to promote the law because it created social order, but they themselves oftentimes didn't follow the law at all. Sadducees were something else. They didn't believe any of this Bible stuff, any of this Old Testament stuff. They didn't believe even that there was resurrection. They didn't believe there were any angels. They believed that when you died, your spirit would just go on, like Greek mythology, much like the New Age today or many religions today. So that was Sadducees. They used the temple as a way to make money for themselves, and it was very political. But so were the Pharisees as well. It's kind of the right and the left, kind of like today, isn't it? So Paul is brought to the Sanhedrin, which is made up of these two political parties through elections, and much like the Senate in the United States, except Rome was in charge, and they gave the ability for the Jewish people to rule themselves. They couldn't put people to death. They couldn't do things that were capital crimes, but they certainly could exact rules within their community and control how the government worked and how the temple worked for the people. And so that was how the government situation was set up. And of course, Jesus had been judged by the Sanhedrin as he should have been crucified. That's what they did. And in fact, the Sanhedrin, when Jesus was brought there, if you'll remember in the story, the Sanhedrin was not supposed to meet after dark. That's according to the book of the Bible in Leviticus. You're not supposed to meet after dark for any meetings because you can't hide things at night, right? And but Jesus was condemned in the middle of the night. So there were many people that were on the Sanhedrin that never even knew that he was going to be hung on a cross by the morning. It's amazing. Joseph of Arimathea was perhaps one of them, and Nicodemus perhaps another. Paul was going to go through the exact same thing, but he has a card that Jesus didn't have. He was a Roman citizen. And the Romans would protect his body, protect him, his person, but they would allow him to be able to speak to the Sanhedrin and discover, allow them to discover what he's really saying so that everyone can see exactly what's going on. Because as I mentioned in a couple episodes back, there was a lot of disinformation happening, a lot of lies being said. And people, when the media in your country is basically promoting lies, people don't know what truth is and they don't believe stuff, and then they start to come up with alternate truths, and it gets even more complicated. And that's what happened with Paul. So we have here the time when he is brought before the Sanhedrin in chapter 23 of Acts, verse 1. So Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and he said, "My brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day." Then the high priest Ananias said, "Strike that man." And one of the priest's guards smacked him, beat him across the head. Boom! This reminds me of exactly what Jesus went through. If you'll remember, Jesus, when he was being accused, he said right to Caiaphas that, I am, the I am statement. And he was hit hard. And Jesus turned and looked at him and said, "If I've spoken an untrue, I understand that you hit me. But if I speak the truth, why do you hit me?" And Paul experiences the exact same thing. He hits Paul. And if you'll remember, Caiaphas was the high priest, but they had a system that was like a rotational system. This system was not biblical, and it wasn't from Leviticus, okay? This was totally pagan, the system that the Jewish people were underneath, under Rome. So Ananias, that was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, instructed one of the guards to hit Paul. And Paul turns to him and says to him, "God strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there in judgment according to the law, yet you yourselves violate the law, commanded that I be struck." Which is true. The law states in Leviticus, you do not strike anyone in the middle of a trial. It's almost like someone going to a trial and the judge allow the defense attorney or the prosecution to strike the person that's the witness. That's not, or even the person accused. It doesn't work like that. Paul says the truth, but then, because he said God will strike you, that was like a curse, right? One of those standing there in verse 4 says, "How dare you insult the high priest?" Paul replied, "Brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest, for it is written, 'Do not speak evil about the ruler of your people.'" Then Paul, knowing that there were Sadducees in the room, he said, now here it comes again to shrewdness and smarts. He says, "My brothers, I am a Pharisee, descended from Pharisees. I stand on trial because of the hope of the resurrection of the dead." At that point, all of a sudden, a dispute broke out between the Republicans and the Democrats. The Pharisees and the Sadducees. All of a sudden, they start fighting among themselves. Do you see what Paul is doing? The Sadducees didn't believe in resurrection from the dead because they're basically a bunch of spiritists. They're a bunch of basically Greeks in the way they think, not Hebrew. And the Pharisees are Hebrew and biblical. And they start to attack each other. The right and the left, boom, start to attack each other, and Paul steps back. And immediately the fight ensues. How do you like that? This is the problem that we see. So this begs the question. How does one get to a place like this? Israel, that had been established by God, made to be his own country, one that was to have a priesthood of all believers, have the kingdom of priests, one that was set up with the rules to make everything right. How does one get to this place where the plain truth of the Bible and God is something that it seems like is forgotten completely? Everyone's scrapping for who's going to be in charge. The left and the right fighting for top dog position. The Sadducees and Pharisees, the Republicans and the Democrats fighting away at everything. How do we get to that? Well, root of it is exactly the way that Paul dealt with this situation. He understood that they were so concerned about themselves and their own human system, their own way, so busy trying to scrap for number one. I need to be in charge. Not these Pharisees, not these Democrats, not these Republicans, not these Sadducees. I need to be in charge. And even though we have someone that we disagree with and hate because he is bringing people to Jesus, still, it doesn't matter whether you're bringing people to Jesus. I'm not getting what I want, so I'm going to kill him. I'm sorry, I'm not going to. But that was the mentality. You know, I have been at churches that have even been like that. It's funny, when you bring people to Jesus, there are some that are happy and so excited. And then there are others, and sometimes they're right in the temple. They're right in the sanctuary. The leadership of the church that will become angry because when you're bringing people to Jesus, it is not them who's in charge. It's God who's in charge. And so what do? They attack me or others who they feel are the ones stopping their power. I'd like to call them the Seventh-day Adventist atheists. The ones who believe in only their own way, man's way or woman's way, but it's not God's way. My friends, I ask you to be a part of God's way. And now I'll end with something. As Rome saw this whole craziness happening in the Sanhedrin and it becoming as crazy as it was in the temple, the procurator pulls Paul out with the soldiers, brings him into a Roman prison again. But God has a message for him. And let me read that message right now. In the night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, this is Jesus we're talking about. Jesus speaks to him again. Take courage, as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you will also testify about me in Rome. Isn't that powerful? Through this difficult circumstance that Paul is going through, God comes and stands next to him and says, you're going to go further than I went. I'm going to take you to Rome, Paul. I'm going to make sure that this message will move forward. This is what Paul wanted all along through his ministry. And now God has presented the moment. Thank you so much for being a part. In the next few minutes, we're going to have the intercession. Intercession is a time where we do our prayers. So join me at 7:15. But before you join at 7:15 tonight, smash the like button, subscribe, make sure this thing moves forward, share this, become a part whether on YouTube or become a part of the movement on Facebook. And don't forget that if you have never been baptized, here's the place to do it. I'd love to be able to teach you the Bible and work together with you to make a new life for Jesus and for yourselves. May God bless you. See you in a few moments in intercession. Bye-bye.